To start this project, we'll have to remove the splash pan from beneath the engine compartment of the car. There are a total of 8 T27 Torx head bolts. This is what you have right here. They go around the perimeter of the pan, remove those, drop the pan, and put it to the side. If it's like mine, it's saturated with antifreeze, and you may want to wash that out. The next step in this project is to prepare to drain the coolant out of the radiator in the coolant system. To do that, we need to remove this panel right here. You can actually do that. You can actually drain the coolant without removing this panel, but it would be messy. The red dial right there, the red cap, is the end of the petcock for this. You can actually remove this and the water would flow out of there, but it's going to splash here onto the floor. To prevent that, we'll pull this panel down. You open that petcock slowly, and there's a drain tube just about in this location that sits right above this panel, and it will drain the coolant without making a mess on the floor. There are approximately 8 to 10 T27 and plastic connectors just like this one here. I've already separated this one and be ready to pull it out. And here's the last of the T27 bolts. So here's challenge number 1. This cap right here is supposed to be attached to the petcock on the bottom of the radiator. I didn't even touch it, and it snapped off in my fingers. So I'm going to try. Here is the petcock here. It has a small indentation in it. I'm going to try and use a screwdriver to hopefully open that and drain the coolant out of it. So here goes nothing. A small, like 1/8 inch screwdriver, counterclockwise. It's spinning. Thank goodness this worked so far. Hopefully I can get it back together again. The coolant's barely draining out of the radiator petcock. I'm going to open up the expansion tank here, and hopefully this will facilitate and make this a little faster. That sounds good. And you can see that it is draining faster now. While the radiator continues to drain, the next thing I'm going to do is move the expansion tank out of the way here. I have the cap is not tightened all the way. Just grasp it firmly and pull up on it like that. There are 2 connectors, one here and one over here, and just move it out of the way. The next thing we need to do is support the engine, because I'm going to disconnect the motor mount on it. I don't want it to slip or fall. So I'm going to place this floor jack underneath the oil pan and lift it up slightly. And as I said, I'm just putting a slight amount of pressure on the engine block just to support the engine. Now that I have the engine supported with the jack stand, the next step is to go ahead and remove, to loosen the engine mount from the engine block and the engine mount from the side frame here in the car. So to do that, there are 2 18mm nuts right here and 2 15mm nuts right here. I'm going to remove these 15mm bolts first. Looks like I am going to have to go ahead and remove those 10mm bolts so I can remove this line over the top of the engine bracket. Remove this bracket, and this bracket was a 10mm bolt. It's not. It is a 8mm bolt, and you need a deep socket to get over this stud that's on here. All right, the next step is to remove the three 10mm bolts that are on the water pump pulley itself. As you can see, I have not yet removed the serpentine belt, and that's because I first thought I would be able, the belt would provide enough tension to keep the pulley from spinning, but that wasn't the case. As you can see, it's pretty tight in there, so what I ended up doing is I can't do it because I'm filming this with one hand and trying to use two wrenches, but I'll show you what I used, and you can figure this out on your own. It's pretty easy. I used two wrenches. One was a slightly offset 10mm wrench, and that one helps because you got to kind of keep your hands out of the way of each other. And the second one was a little longer ratcheting 10mm wrench. I don't know if the ratcheting is necessary, but it certainly helps in this case. Using the shorter wrench, I was able to hold it, and then I went around and I loosened the two bolts first. Then I went back and I retightened one of the ones I had loosened, unloosened the third bolt, and then re-loosened the one I'd previously tightened. So the next thing you have to do is remove the tension on this idler pulley here to allow you to slip the belt over the pulley. You can do that in one of two ways, using one of two wrenches. I'll show them both. The first one, using a 14mm open-end wrench. You put it on the back side of the pulley, and you can push it forward. It only goes forward about an inch or less than. Okay, you can do it that way. Or you can also use a 13mm wrench, put it on the front of the pulley on the bolt itself, and push it forward. Put the tension, and then remove the belt. I'm loosening the three bolts on the water pump pulley now. This is a pretty tight spot to get into. In the other videos I've watched on this, no one has had to deal, or none that I've seen, have had to deal with the air conditioning plumbing going through here. So I'm a little curious as to how this is going to go for me. Here's the first bolt out. The ratcheting wrencher comes in handy right here. This would be very, very tedious otherwise. Bolt number 2. Now working on bolt number 3. My plan was also to change the serpentine belt, but in my case, I'd have to loosen the belt off the air conditioning compressor, and I'm not about to do that. I'm going to try lifting up the engine a little bit more to get some enough clearance to move this, get this belt, the pulley off of the pulley face. I'm going to try using a pry bar to see if I can push the engine back just a couple fractions of an inch. What a project that was! So if you didn't see what I was doing, I lifted the engine up even more on the jack, and then I pushed the engine, rocked it back and forth to give me enough space. It's really, really tight clearances in here to get this pulley out. So the next thing I need to do is to be able to remove 3 bolts on the water pump. There's one. There's one right here. There's one just below it. And there's one off to the side over here. I'm not sure if you can see where my hand is. It's in here behind this pipe here. So I need to use those. Those are 8mm bolts. And using a ratchet to get in there. It's a pretty tight spot. A 1/4 inch ratchet. That one's already loosened up. So that's the first bolt. Second bolt is beneath the pump on the left hand side. And the bolt's coming out very easily too. I'm just using my fingers on the socket to spin it out. Bolt number 2. Third bolt, unfortunately for me, is behind this air conditioning pipe here. It's going to be a little tight spot to get to. So here's the point where I need to admit my mistake. I actually removed one of the wrong bolts. There are 3 bolts to the water pump. However, the water pump and the timing chain cover are very close together, and I actually removed one of the bolts from the timing chain cover but didn't realize it until probably 20 minutes or more into the project. So the point is, look closely at the bolts you are going to remove, examine them, and make sure that you don't remove the wrong one. Here's the issue. I removed the wrong bolt. I removed a timing cover bolt. Let's put that one back in. I have all the proper bolts out. That one, and that one. Okay. Here it comes. It's loose now. All right, let me see if I can get my hands on it. Here's the old water pump. It was wedged in there very tightly, and unfortunately my camera died as I was trying to video its removal. It took quite a bit of time to get it out of there. I had to use the pump sits in the engine this way. This soft plug here is on the bottom. I had to wedge screwdrivers in from here, from beneath the car, up in here as well too, and was able to get one behind here too, so to wiggle it back and forth. I wasn't to look at the gasket. It is completely swollen and is way bigger than it originally was, and there was getting quite a bit of leakage on the bottom of the pump right here. I'm going to place the new O-ring on the pump and make sure that the gasket or the O-ring does not catch on any of the sharp edges on this impeller. Just slide it over the impeller. And then just roll it onto the base. There you go. Quite a bit of difference on the fit of the new pump with the new gas O-ring and the old pump. Go ahead and I'll get ready to install the pump back into the engine block. This is the top of the pump here. This is the bottom. You can see it has this soft plug. Taking care not to damage the O-ring or anything like that. Let me go ahead and get the bolts in first. Alright, got this one started now. Go ahead and I'll get this one started. Taking care not to cross thread the bolts in the engine block. And the last bolt was right there. This was the one that was really tight to get to. I had to be careful not to cross thread this bolt. It wasn't going in straight at first. Let me just go ahead and zoom in here so you can see where I'm going at. So I just want to show you, this is a pretty tight spot. That's where I'm going, right there. The tip of the screwdriver is. So it's pretty hard to get your both hands down in there. Next step is to reinstall the pulley. So hopefully it will go on quicker than when it came off. It was a trick to get off. There we go. That was easier than it came off. 3 10mm bolts. Putting in very easily. Next one. The next step here is just going to be snugging up these pump pulley bolts. Once the belt is on, I have a little more tension to tightening them up all the way. Next is the rerouting of the belt, which will be a challenge. Over the alternator, around the back side of the pulley, and over the belt tensioner. Next here is a 14mm wrench. Alright, let me try and retighten these bolts here. Actually, they're tightening up quite a bit. I'm comfortable with how tight they are on here. Get ready to reinstall the motor mount on here. Reinstall the nuts on the engine mounting side of the bracket, and I'll drop the engine back down because I remember I've raised it up quite a bit to try and get that pump pulley. So next is to drop the engine down slowly. Don't want it to fall off or anything like that. It's getting closer. I think I'll do the back bolt first. Start that one. There we go. Complete. Drop the engine down a little more. It's got to come quite a ways forward. There we go. Actually, just doing that should work. There we go. Drop the engine down some more. See where that gets us. There we go.